welcome everybody to episode 227 of the Look Out Sir Warhammer podcast, where myself and Phil, hello Phil, how are you today?
Hello, I am good, thank you.
Amazing. Where myself and Phil are going to talk about what, Phil?
We are going to talk about Crusade, Tyrannic War, in brackets, none of the Crusade rules.
No, that's it, absolutely. This is us basically trying to ramp into the 500 Worlds campaign event that will be closing out Warhammer 40,000's 10th edition. Obviously, Games Workshop have announced 500 Worlds, and we felt it was only prudent that we go back and look at all the other narrative happenstance that has occurred within Warhammer 40,000's 10th edition that has taken us to 500 Worlds. Will it turn out, Phil, that they had been teasing exciting things that will conclude within 500 Worlds, or are they all going to be a random set of isolated incidents that have nothing to do with each other? That is what we hope to solve, is that not right?
Yeah, I think the answer is you are correct.
In so much as, who knows, but yeah, I think it probably in all likelihood is a series of isolated incidents as opposed to a kind of coherent narrative,
100%.
But we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. But it was exciting, right? It was good to go through it, and hopefully you enjoyed the episode for what it is. And as I say, this hopefully will give you a really good insight into the events of Leviathan, or more specifically the Tyrannic War, the fourth Tyrannic War. And then, yeah, from there we're going to move on to the next one, so Pariah Nexus, and then it's going to be Nacron Gauntlet, and then Armageddon, and then we'll get into talking about all the fluff lore things that are happening around 500 Worlds, as well as obviously other things that we end up talking about in the time between. This is us basically predicting how the next 6 months are going to go until 11th edition come out. So hopefully you enjoy it, and if you do, please, consider giving us a 5-star review, which has been given to us this week by a lovely chap called Bob Knight, who is giving us this 5-star review on Audible of the United States of America, but they themselves are actually from Finland. So hang around to hear Bob Knight's lovely 5-star review, but please consider giving us one as well if you could do so. Otherwise, you can obviously like and comment in the places where you are able to do so. There is obviously also merchandise as well. We love flogging the merchandise wherever possible, but probably the best and most awesome way that you can support Look Out Sir is via Patreon, which is obviously a place where great humans have gone to throw us a couple of quid to make the whole doing of this podcast more feasible over time. Anything that I missed, Phil? Anything that needs elaboration?
Well, I would personally like to shout out, and maybe you will too, Tommy, the patron supporter from America that handed to Joe Coles while he was in America at the World Championships a tiny red dice with what looks like a squig on it, and he passed these dice on to Joe to then pass on to us. So thank you, Tommy, for your custom, I think it's your club dice. Thank you very much, I appreciate that love and support.
Are you being mean to Tommy by saying that his dice is tiny? I thought it was a perfectly normal sized dice and completely reasonable.
I know it is, but all dice are tiny in my jumbo hands.
It's a big dice, Phil. Why you got to be mean about his dice like that, Perfectly well-sized
right.
dice.
It's not one of those. It's not for tiny dice.
No, absolutely. No, thank you, Tommy. It really was cool to receive those from Joe, and hopefully you had a lovely time chatting with him while you were out there. And who knows? Maybe myself and Phil will qualify one year and see you out there.
True.
Maybe
one day.
Most likely not, though. We might try in 2011, sorry, it's 11th edition, 2020, what are we now, 2026, that's what next year is, isn't it?
But it will be next year.
Yeah. Dead soon, Phil, at least I hope.
Exactly. If not dead, playing Napoleonics.
Oh, can't wait for the Napoleonic era. It's coming, Phil, I can feel it. The monocle is starting to manifest. Anyway, brilliant. Right, well, there we go. As is tradition, we're going to transition now to the 5-star review. So, yeah, cheers for supporting the show. Thanks for listening, and hopefully, you enjoy what we have to say this time around. Transitional noise. As has already been clarified, this 5-star review has come via way of Audible and is said to have come via the United States. We do well, Phil, in the United States, but not as well as we do in Finland, which is a reference to Patrick Starr being hit on the head by a bowling ball there. Anyway, anything you wanted to say, Phil, about Bob Knight and their 5-star review before I read it to you?
Well, how can I? I'm not psychic.
Well, fair enough. Maybe you'd maybe you'd sort of looked at it already, is what I was trying to, say.
Oh, no, I haven't. I like the surprise.
You like the surprise, fine. So, allow me. Greetings from the frozen, icy land of Finland. I've been to Finland. I can concur. It is both frozen and or icy on occasion. I went up in November sometime, many moons ago. My God, it was cold and or dark would be the way I would describe it. But lovely. The people were great, although very to the point, unlike me, I would say. Yes. I've been enjoying the gem of a podcast since the dark days of COVID. And from then on, spent countless hours listening to Dan and Phil ramble on about plastic figurines, obscure 80s TV shows, shed construction updates, and so on. Anyway, here it is. Too many more episodes of Look Out, Sir, I should have said. Anyway, here is two, as in a sort of celebration. A bit of dyslexia got the better of me there. But a long story short is Bob Knight is supporting us from Finland, via America, fan of the show, showing the love and support. Cheers very much, Bob Knight. You're an absolute gentleman and a scholar. I hope that you are enduring and enjoying the winter months in Finland. Stay warm, stay indoors. Look forward to the endless summer to come. That's where it really starts to get exciting. But to elaborate on all those things and more, here's Phil.
Thank you, Bob Knight. Glad you've been an avid listener since the dark times. Glad you're still with us. Glad you're enjoying the shed updates. The shed is obviously now built, which is great. And I'm sitting in the comfort of it right now with central heating. Glad you're doing well. Glad you enjoy the 80s references as well. That's always good. I was trying to think of a great 80s TV show to recommend, but I can't remember what it's called. There's one, is it Jim Henson Puppets? But he did a TV show that was each week was a different story. You probably know the one.
Oh, what, The Storyteller?
Storyteller, yeah. There's some episodes on YouTube. Well worth checking out.
They're on Amazon as well, actually, or at least they are in the UK.
Oh, are they?
Yeah, you can watch them on Amazon. But a lot of people have done AI upscales of them, which is super fun. Another weird one, if you're looking for really random Jim Henson stuff, is he did do a collaboration with SNL back in the day, so Saturday Night Live, and he did this kind of adult-orientated version of the Muppets before the Muppet Show was commissioned. I can't remember the exact name of it, but it was a kind of caveman civilization of dinosaur cavemen creatures, and essentially what happened with it, I believe, is that the SNL writers weren't that into it, so they were kind of tasked with writing the skits and did a very bad job of it. So it lasted one season.
Fair. That's a shame.
It is a shame. Poor old Jim Henson. But yeah, there you go. He also, I found out recently, did a pilot for a Little Mermaid kids show. But that was during a weird time where he collabed with Disney just before he died, actually. It was probably one of the last things he ever did.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I love me some Jim Henson. We went to see Godzilla the other day, although that was a movie from the 60s. So
that was Godzilla versus Ebera.
Yeah, the lobster creature.
Horror from the deep, which was disappointingly just a giant lobster. It wasn't a monster. It was just an upscaled lobster.
I mean, it was quite a scary creature. I mean, I don't know how
he did impale quite a few people on his jumbo claw.
It was amazing.
That's true.
The guy. So there was a guy. So we went to the Barbican in central London to go and watch this movie because I love an old Godzilla movie, as does Phil, obviously. And
Richard was there, Quizmaster Richie.
Quizmaster Richie, absolutely. Yeah, it was a good time. And the guy kind of described the fact that there's this really rubbish kaiju that turns up for a minute. And to be fair, that didn't disappoint, did it? That big chicken that just kind of arrives and then gets slapped down.
Got set on fire or something.
Oh yeah, you were late. You missed the kind of preamble about all the little funny things.
Yes. Yeah.
Anyway, but there you go. So I'm not sure how much of that was 80s. It probably was a combination of early 90s and late 60s there. But good times, any of that is good. So yeah, brilliant. Cheers very much for the support, Bob Knight. You're an absolute saint. If you want to be like Bob Knight and give us a 5-star review, please do so. Otherwise, we're going to get on with the show, right, Phil?
We are 100%. And again, no Crusade rules, anyone.
No Crusade rolls. Transitional noise. All right, all, it's the end times of 2025, so we're going to be, filling up your ears with some, not filler content necessarily, but certainly not current affairs, because, there's not a huge amount being announced or talked about now that they've done all of the big reveals for the end of the year. We've got, obviously, the Warhammer Quest thing coming out soon, as well as obviously all the different Christmas bits and pieces. But yeah, as is inevitably the case, December is a quiet time in the world of Warhammer related news and things, although they obviously will hit us with some exciting updates on Christmas Day, as is their wont and way. But yeah.
Plus the Grotmus stuff that will come.
Oh, yes, of course, the Grotmus stuff. That's good filler. So, okay, fair enough. That's a good point. So essentially, December's actually quite busy, but there's a bit of a weird period between now and then, essentially. So we're doing a bit of a lore thingy-bib, because, we love to talk about the lore or the fluff or whatever you want to call it that makes up Warhammer 40,000. So myself and Phil have dived into our Rulebook Leviathans, or did you actually have the actual campaign book, or did you, or are you?
I bought the book.
You got Crusade,
because I want
Tyrannic
it separately.
War.
Although weirdly, it comes with the core rules inside to
really?
basically bulk it out. Yeah, it has the core rules inside. So it's a bit odd because I guess I also bought the standalone 10th edition book as well.
Yeah.
Which I guess has extra lore and sort of
other lore,
background and artwork, plus the core rules. That in a way you could have probably just got on that book. And although, as we always say, the rules are changing constantly from release.
That's it.
So maybe it wasn't needed. But yeah, so that book has the Tyrannic War story in, plus a bunch of Crusade stuff and campaign missions and things like that in it as well. Yeah.
Increasingly, I feel like the core rule books only really have value to new people entering the hobby and the world who want to kind of immerse themselves in a kind of one-stop shop that gives them loads of interesting insights on all the different factions and all the different, events that have led us up to this point. I think when it comes to actually buying the rule book for the rules, it's a relatively pointless purchase because of the nature of the game now in terms of its frequent updates. Although obviously they circumnavigated that with the Leviathan version of the rulebook that came in the Leviathan box set that was, of course, the announce, or release version of 10th edition Warhammer 40,000. So, you got your Leviathan deck of cards, which was the tournament standard at the time, and then also got the contents of the Tyrannic War Crusade book kind of bundled up within it, I suppose, just to kind of fluff it out and give it a bit more of a added value, I guess, to people who already know all of the things that is Warhammer 40,000 and wants to learn more about the story as it is developing, I suppose.
No, that's true.
But yeah, we're going to talk about the events of what is essentially the fourth Tyrannic War as described within the pages of Crusade, Tyrannic War, or Rulebook Leviathan, should you, have either version. It's an interesting thing because we've said it before, that, 40k from a timeline perspective has all gone a little bit wibbly now, and they have essentially kind of drawn a line and then maybe rubbed it out a bit and then, drawn new lines and then maybe interlacing lines over the top of those and gotten to a point where they're close enough. So, yeah, we're always seemingly at a point where it's really difficult to completely accurately place things, although the events of the fourth Tyrannic War basically follow the Great Rift and the events of, obviously, the conclusion that was the third Tyrannic War that concluded on Baal when High Fleet Leviathan was presumed defeated by the Blood Angels. Or was that Behemoth? No, it was Leviathan, wasn't it? That the Blood Angels were dealing with there.
Yes, it would have been Leviathan, yeah.
Yeah, so that series of events concluded with basically the Blood Angels making a heroic last stand, sort of similar to that you might remember from the Two Towers movie, The Lord of the Rings, where the riders of Rohan came, smashing out from Helm's Deep into the invading hordes of orcs, only then for Gandalf the White, as he was then at that time, to come crashing down a mountain, or not a mountain, but more of a hillside, assisted with other, riders of Rohan to essentially quash the things. In the events of the third Tyrannic War, though, Gandalf the White is basically replaced by commander of the, demons of Khorne, essentially. And it was much less a kind of collaborative, heroic thing, more of just I'm not letting these bugs kill you. I'm going to do it. Which is also odd, because you kind of feel like he probably would have just, killed Leviathan and then gone and killed, the Blood Angels, because they were pretty much at that point ready for the slaughter. But I guess Commander's vibe is that he wants to do it when they're at least a sort of semblance of a fighting force, not just
a challenge.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I guess that's the implication. Although, yeah, it never really made sense that he didn't just sort of, swoop in for the kill at that point. Because let's be honest, what was replacing the Blood Angels essentially was, at least initially in 10th edition, a kind of weird Ultramarines version of them anyway, what with the whole kind of strangeness that was the whole kind of, Primaris reinforcement project.
The Grey Shield.
The Grey Shields, yeah, and all that kind of stuff. But again, they have obviously Blood Angel gene seed, and some of them are, from, a more pure stock and all the rest of it, because, the times of the heresy and what have you. So, yeah, who knows, really. But conveniently, all of the major characters in the forces of the Blood Angels managed to live the First Tyrannic War and got off cleanly, because a combination of Commander, him being one of the major greater demons of Khorne, one of the big bloodthirsters, killed up Leviathan, presumably. It was definitely a Khorne bloodthirster or demon incursion of some sort did it, because they basically arranged the skulls and the paraphernalia of the Nids into a symbol of Khorne, just to make it very clear that, they had some hand in it. But also, I believe...
Like a calling card. A calling card.
A calling card, absolutely. But yeah, also Gilliman turned up as well, didn't he? I'm sure Gilliman turned up also. He got involved.
It was... I think there was a brief period of time where everyone was like, oh, so there's not many Blood Angels left. And then Games Workshop were like, no. Gilliman and his Indomitus Crusaders gone and reinforced them pretty much immediately for the sake of people that want to collect and play Blood Angels. And,
yes.
Try and be lore accurate to an extent. So that was a bit of a shame that they didn't really have any kind of consequences or real negative effects. But that's the way these things go. They've got to push those Primaris Marines if we're being cynical. Like, here, everyone gets them straight away.
Yeah. And the ones that would seemingly be a bit negative about having them, don't worry, they were in a perilous situation, so it's fine. They're
Well, I think that was what they went with. They went with it's a dire strait that they are in.
Yeah.
So they have to accept them, even if they wouldn't normally. Even the secretive Dark Angels, they just have to take them on.
Yeah. So yeah, basically, this happens after the Third Tyrannic War, which is concluded on Baal. It happens after the Great Rift. So, as I understand it, the sequence of events. Was the Third Tyrannic War happening after the Great Rift? It would have done, wouldn't it? Because obviously, if Gilliman has turned up with the things, it must have happened after the Great Rift.
I think the Third Tyrannic War was happening prior, and then it ended, by the sounds of it, when the Great Rift happened, because that's what allowed the demons to come in and clean up Baal.
There you go.
My assertion, and then theirs. But then that was at the point where they did a bit of a time jump to, yes, the Indomitus Crusaders happened, and everyone's been reinforced, and that was a bit that they sort of retconned to an extent. a bit in the same way, talking about the Plague War, which was, because I think we talked about it in the last episode where I was a bit confused when it actually happens now, so I did some research, and it was meant to be at the end of the Indomitus Crusade, and then they redid the books and republished them, and they basically said it was 10 years into the Indomitus Crusade. So in our timeline of events where we're meant to be playing, that has already sort of been and gone and happened. So the 500 Worlds campaign, which we'll be leading into, is a post-Plague War era for sort of the Ultramar setting.
Yeah. And then I suppose other key events, basically. The Indomitus Crusade is happening at the time of this. Abaddon and Vashtor have gone on their little adventure looking for keys to, unlock the Arcs of Omen and all of the super weapon fun that comes with that. And Lionel Johnson has also returned as well at this point in time. So Lionel Johnson is in play at this time, right? So if you're looking at like the major kind of narrative moments, all of those things have been basically established. And then, lo and behold, Tyranids are coming, through, appearing on the Western Front. And that is obviously a problem for the Imperium. So the broad logic was that they kind of knew that the Tyranids were probably going to come in from the West, from what I understand. They kind of had an inkling that it was occurring because they kind of have entered the galaxy upon a different plane, right? So, like, obviously, if the galaxy kind of, or rather the sort of solar system sort of exists on a relatively flat kind of surface as all things spin around the sun, these things are essentially coming in from up top. And they started out by appearing in the east, and now another bit of it is descending into the west. So it kind of speaks to just the massive size of Leviathan and how it works effectively. But yeah, seemingly Guilliman was more interested in trying to recapture worlds and to basically go after the forces of chaos and deal with all the various things that were going on in that space. So Guilliman's Indomitus Crusade was very much focused on the chaosiness and dealing with the Great Rift and things. He just sort of put the Tyranid situation into the tall grass, so to speak. And then before he knew it, things started going wrong because all of a sudden there were like Imperial worlds that were preparing for conflicts that never happened. So it'd be like, all right, we reckon this is going to turn up any minute. Get ready, boys. And then all of a sudden, oh, no one's here. Okay, cool, I guess. That kind of series of events basically is people start like disappearing, stuff starts going wrong. And then effectively we enter into a situation where people are fleeing from all of the bad things that are happening as Leviathan is kind of moving in. And again, essentially the Imperium becomes increasingly aware that things have gone a bit poorly. And effectively off the back of that, we begin the fourth Tyrannic War, right? Like that's basically the kind of the preamble to getting us into things kicking off, so to speak. Unless I'm misplaced in my timeline here, Phil. But me and Phil, by the way, for dear listeners, we've both written our own documents to outline the timeline. So this is how I've interpreted it. So I'm intrigued to know if Phil aligns because we've sort of done independent research and work and not actually shared our notes at this point.
Yeah, quite possibly. Well, the way I did it is I basically summarized each page in the story with a brief paragraph. So it's quite detailed, but it's still synopsized and is a bit more, I guess, story-led. And would sort of explain it in detail. If you would like a story time episode, I can go through it.
Well, that's fine, mate. Yeah, no, if you want to go with that, we can do it that way for sure. I've just sort of done the key events as I understood them and was going to just sort of ramble through it, but it probably doesn't hurt to have some of the narrative flavour. Maybe by some random happenstance, the two approaches will align into a beautiful whole, as in WHOLE, not just HOLE. But yes, fine. So yeah, basically, as we understand it, a bunch of stuff has happened. Lionel Johnson is running around doing his thing. Abaddon and Vashtor are making keys. Roberte's on an Indomitus Crusade. Katia has fallen. Obviously, all that stuff has happened. The Great Rift has occurred. Imperial Nihilists, la 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 la. And there we are. People are disappearing. Stuff's dying. Things are going off. and we are kicking things off. So I'm guessing, Phil, that would be a perfect opportunity for you to use your paragraph and describe the events of the opening pages, I guess.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So the first section is called "The Shadow Descends."
Yes.
So it starts off. The first few pages, if I remember rightly, were like little story elements, and I've just bulked it all into one thing. So it starts off with Judge Herman Krantz of the Arbites. He's aboard a ship called the Black Reckoning, and he translates to the Egran system, and he discovers thousands of Tyranid bioships. He orders a distress signal to warn nearby systems. One manages to be sent eventually, despite the shadow in the warp, but basically kills the astropath in the process. And with his ship being heavily damaged, Krantz activates its self-destruct sequence and plunges the Black Reckoning towards the nearest enemy ship. So sort of a self-sacrifice, but he's got the message out there that Tyranids have invaded the western area
western,
of the galaxy. Then the next bit is a darkness in the west. So you're in the Asmodex sector, which is fringe worlds, and astropath beacons start going silent, which is clearly the shadow and warp starting to emerge. Refugees spread to the central systems, and with them news that 2 Leviathan tendrils have invaded, one coming through the galactic plane, which was called the Nautilin tendril, while the other comes through the Morphium sector, which is called the Promethor tendril. So these are the 2 initial tendrils. Spoiler alert, there's a third one which we'll get into in a bit later. These are basically running in parallel with each other, and they're heading towards Terra. The Eyes of the Emperor, as they're known, are the old custodies who venture out beyond Terra, acting as and creating their own spy networks. Basically, when they're too old to fight, this is what they do. They leave Terra and go off out in their way of still defending Terra in their own form. It was through these networks that Terra was made aware of this new Tyranid threat. So good on the Custodes. 3 such individuals aboard the vessel Pinion lands on Terra and addresses Trajan Valoris himself. Trajan then petitions the High Lords of Terra to mobilise new forces for a defence and a counterattack, and that marks the official start of the Tyrannic War. All makes sense so far?
Makes total sense, my friend. Makes total sense, absolutely. Yeah, so I think... because is this the first time the Eyes of the Emperor have been spoken about? Is that like a new concept, or did they have that around for ages and we just weren't really ever previously aware of it? It's sort of a weird thing, isn't it? Where it's like a custody that's gotten really, really old to the point that they're like, just go away. Is this their way of basically describing why some custodies back in the day used to just wear robes and helmets, as it were? It's sort of like
possibly
a justification for the old military life.
Who knows? I think this is the first time I've heard this concept. I do remember from one of the Vaults on Terror books, I think it was the very first one by Chris Ray, there was a scene I loved, and I think it's the Inquisitor talking to Custodes, and basically the Inquisitor's like, oh, I didn't think you ever left Terror. You were meant to defend the throne. And basically he goes, well, everywhere is Terror because it is all the Emperor's domain. And that was like his justification for, yes, we're technically not meant to leave Terror, but we do. Yes. And I was like, oh, that's a kind of clever sort of workaround for explaining it. But then saying that post of a Cicatrix Maledictum, they all go off anyway. So maybe this is just like a revision of what that was. But yeah, I think this was the first time I've noticed it in terms of books.
Because again, I suppose this idea that, Custodes... Because again, one of the things that's always kind of been conceptually consistent within the idea of these, like, transhuman, these super soldiers, these bioengineered warriors, is that they are functionally immortal, right? But I guess even though they are functionally immortal, by the standards of Custodes, at least they at least dwindle in terms of their
they're not going to be
functionality, I
at
suppose.
peak performance forever, especially if you're probably 1,000 years old or something.
Or tens of thousand years of age, probably.
Yeah, maybe even longer.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it makes sense, I suppose. I'm amazed that many of the Custodes, I guess, during the events of the last like sort of 10,000 years. I mean, Terra has obviously dealt with a number of kind of incursions in terms of like Gene Stealer cults and the events of the Beast in terms of the orcs almost kind of managing to invade Terra and et cetera, et cetera. So there have obviously been instances where they've had to throw hands. But I guess, the last kind of 10,000 years following the events of the heresy have probably been relatively chill by Custodes standards.
You'd have thought so. You'd have thought so, for sure.
Yeah. So they probably had an opportunity. Plus, also, the Emperor is not at his best these days. So the whole kind of rejuvenating themselves in the light of the Emperor has probably been somewhat diminished, as it were. Because that was like the other thing with Custodes, isn't it? Is that while they're by his side, they're being kind of like healed or rejuvenated or kept kind of consistent, I suppose. But anyway, it is what it is. But that is a decent summary of kind of some of those kind of key events, as it were. I think, the thing is with good old Valores, as it were, because Valores is a High Lord of Terror, right? So the idea is he basically then goes and he's effectively forcing the Lords of Terror to act at this point, right? Like he's kind of coming in and being like, come on now, boys. Got to go deal with this problem. And then it's quite evident at this point.
It sounded like he did have to, cajole them a little bit.
Yeah, that's what I was sort of saying.
It's not just what he says goes, because they are of, in a way, equal rank, but obviously, in a way, he probably feels like he's slightly higher up than them, or maybe they would defer to him. But I guess if it's coming from him, it's like an official source, and it's not just like rumours where they're like, oh, well, we need more evidence.
Yeah. And I think this is the thing, isn't it? Because the thing that was really interesting, I suppose, with this event is that obviously they've now got a miniature for Lord Commander Solar, whatever his chops is. What's his name again?
Oh, Leontus.
Leontus, thank you. I keep wanting to say Leonidas, but that's obviously not Leontus. So now they've got a miniature for him. He sort of features quite a lot heavier in this campaign and this narrative, which is understandable. New miniature. He's not been around, has he, very long, so he's got to make a name for himself.
No, it's true.
Yeah, old Leontes, he basically is like, come on now, let's get on with this. He aligns with old Valores. And am I right in asserting, because basically they mobilize the entirety of like the Imperial military complex, shall we say, into this war, which I believe is one of like the first times they've really ever done this, because every other instance where Tyranids have turned up, it's basically been Space Marines defending worlds against them, right? So in like the events of Macragge and the Tyranids of Behemoth fighting Ultramar, it was basically the Ultramarines holding a defense. In the events of the third Tyrannic War with Leviathan attacking Baal basically kind of stood in its own defense as a Space Marine chapter, although obviously in the events of that, the Blood Angels brought back other chapters to contribute. But this is like one of the first times where the Imperium's gone, right, I've had enough of you. Have a full Imperium fighting you.
Yeah, it feels like historically a lot of the kind of campaigns and sort of general invasions that we've had from earlier editions, it's been more of these are the forces that already exist on these planets or in this system, and then they're being attacked, whereas this one was a more proactive defense, which leads me on to the next section, if you're indulging me.
Please, yeah, absolutely.
So the next bit is titled, conveniently, Aggressive Defense. So new Astra Militarum regiments are raised, while others are redeployed from existing war zones and also resupplied. Meanwhile, elite forces of Space Marines, Adeptus Sororitas, Adeptus Mechanicus, and Knight households, and even Custodes, form into small strike teams known as Soul Blades, SOL Blades, numbering only 2 to 3 ships each. Many were commanded by high ranks of Space Marines, some even by ancient dreadnoughts. and they form into these small groups, so it gives them the maneuverability to deal with the Tyranid threat and do sort of hit and run tactics and things like that. Then there's the Anchor Worlds, which is where we get Lord Solar Leontus. He's in charge of mustering the defence. He's determined the course of the two tendrils and selected these Anchor Worlds, is how they're described, which are planets in the path of the Tyranids that could act as a defence, but could also be used to reinforce the Soul Blade. So these are basically the key battleground planets that will be featured in this campaign. The Imperial Fist Station, the Phalanx, is transported with Leontis and his command staff to the most formidable Anchor World, that is of the planet Sanctum, which is basically the key battleground that we're going to have. And then we've got the Soul Blade Strikes. So this is where transmissions from various Soul Blades come through, some with more success than others in terms of the little hit and runs that they're doing. One reports that Ulfway and Lybrasil craft worlds are joining the fight. Another talks about how Raven Guard and Catachan jungle fighters teach guerrilla tactics to the last remaining pockets of fighters on this planet, which increased the resistance to the Tyranid invasion on that one planet. And then another one, which was my favourite, which is where over 10,000 scions die. This is like Astra Militarum scions die in an operation to blow up the geocore reactor of a planet. The devastation destroyed around half of the Kastinov splinter fleet, while the Inquisitor that was involved in the operation, and only 200 scions survived the extraction of the planet blowing up. So these were these little snippets of stories that they give, which I thought was quite interesting.
You mentioned as well the two tendrils. You talked about it, although I don't think we've really kind of spoken about it extensively at this point, because the two tendril thing is kind of an important part of the narrative in terms of, well, I don't know. Now I'm worried that you get into spoilers. I'm trying to phrase it in a way where I don't talk about the fact that there's a third one. But initially you think there's two and then there's a third. There you go. I'm sure at this point, I mean, this is almost 3 years old at this point. Like, come on now. But, and obviously we were going to spoil it anyway as we get into it. But yeah, so at the start, they're dealing with the two tendrils. I can't for the life of me, in my notes, I've just gone two tendrils. One of them was the one that came from beneath, and the other one's the one that came from above.
It was Nautilon and Prometheor.
Okay.
With the two,
which one was which? I don't know which one.
Nautilon was the one that came from the top, and then the second one just sort of appeared. It was a bit badly worded, so I couldn't tell if it implied that it also came from the top, or if it came from the bottom, or if it just like made its way.
I inferred from it that one came from up and one came from down. Was where I went.
I sort of got that impression as well, but it wasn't 100% clear.
No. To be fair, I probably inferred a lot onto it in that sense. But yeah, so that was kind of the element of it, right? There was these two tendrils. Again, the cool thing with the Soul Blades element as well is a really nice, interesting kind of insight into those kind of desperate measures that the Imperium is going through at this time, because, you know, historically following the events of, you know, the heresy and the Index Astartes and everything that essentially entailed, everything was very purposely divided. And famously, I think why, you know, the Blood Angels had to kind of mount their own defensive ball against, you know, the Leviathan fleet during the Third Tyrannic War was that, you know, the sheer levels of bureaucracy and complexity in mobilizing all the different kind of elements of the Imperial Army is such that even a commander as lauded and beloved as Dante struggles within the kind of bureaucratic system to make that occur. Whereas,
this is very much the case of, we are getting the final season of Game of Thrones where everything moves very quickly.
Yes.
You know, what used to take, you know, months to travel somewhere takes no time at all. So historically, raising regiments from scratch and transporting from one area of the galaxy to the other, even relatively short distances, would take months. And in old books, it was things like it would just take years to get anywhere or do anything. The bureaucracy of the Imperium is slow and tedious, and that sort of the whole point of it. Whereas now it feels, alive and rejuvenated, and it's got a bit of what's the word, like a walk, a step in its walk. It's basically being a pep in its step. Yeah, it's basically being far too efficient for its own good, which is great from a sort of just hurrying the story along point of view, because they don't really explain how long in the time frame any of this happens. It just sort of happens one after the other. So this could be being told over several years potentially, but you kind of get the impression it's months at most. The slow, laborious element of the old Imperium is sort of what I love about setting, because that feels much more grimdark rather than this one, which is being very speedy about how it gets things done.
But that was the thing as well. So when the events of the devastation of Baal occurred, like they said, they were essentially cut adrift and left to their own devices. They had to mount their own defense, and they wanted to defend Baal because it's their home world, and it was important to them to do so. And, Dante essentially had to sacrifice other worlds within, close proximity of Baal to, slow the biomass. So they deal a lot with the idea that, they're destroying worlds and trying to, to slow Leviathan as it approaches. And obviously Dante, being in the position he was able to summon back other successor chapters. And there was a lot of interesting intrigue between those chapters as well, because there were ones that were essentially considered traitorous or heretical or whatever you want to call, and they came in. So it added into all those really interesting elements that were kind of established in the world that was. But yeah, like you say, this is one of those things where they're like, wouldn't it be cool if, and then it just sort of starts happening, and you're like, all right, fine, cool, I guess, Gilliman's back, anything's possible. But it was cool that the Raven Guard got involved with it. I like the fact that Shrike was, leading some of these Soul Blades along with Trajan himself. And there's that first Captain Geezer from the Ultramarines that didn't they just recently do a miniature for him? He's got the Thunder Hammer or whatever it is. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I don't think he was in this, because
no, he's not the Thunder Hammer guy. I think he's the guy in the box set in the Terminator armor. Actually, now that I've just quickly Googled it, it's his name is First Captain Agamaman. Oh,
Egaman, yeah. So he appears towards the end of the story, yeah. Has he got a miniature then?
Well, technically, I believe he's represented by the Terminator Captain Mini that comes in the Leviathan box set, yes.
Oh, okay, yeah. That reminds me, there's a bit of a story. I'll just explain it when we get to it. But there's a bit that sort of has a lot of synergy with the box set miniatures, basically, and the animation. Anyway, let's get on to the next bit, yeah?
Well, yeah. No, I was just going to say as well with just the Anchor World stuff. Well, actually, the Anchor World stuff is kind of, let's go on to the next bit rather than, because you explained it quite well, actually, so it doesn't probably need any more embellishment.
The next bit is Into the Maw. So the Soul Blades strike at the two main tendrils using speed and maneuverability to their advantage, while the Tyranids methodically digest all the biomass in the system. Eventually, the tendrils advance slows, so they feel like they're doing a good job. Lord Solar, Leontis and the Phalanx were positioned on Sanctum, the homeworld of the White Templars chapter, and designated an anchor world. I can't remember if I wrote it down later, but basically the majority of the White Templars are actually off on the Indomitus Crusade, so they don't have much in the way of defense themselves. Reports come through from the Naval Battle Group of a new third tendril has emerged, and that's called Grendulus, which is basically the big bad tendril out of the three. Next section is called Before the Swarm. So it was soon clear that the Glendulus tendril was larger than the other two and had also bypassed the majority of the Soul Blades because they were busy fighting the other two tendrils. So Leontus feared that the Bastille subsector defences would not be enough, and but he basically enacted the Sanctuary Protocol. So it was an astropathic distress call to call for aid from the other anchor worlds, the Soul Blades, and even from the Segmentum Solar, because he's like, oh dear God, this is coming straight for us. And we have no defenses because it's sort of not going to the anchor worlds that we had already plotted for the other two tendrils. So this is going to be a problem. The next section's Bastior besieged. So as the Grendulous tendril reached the Bastior subsector, they were besieged by unknown warp entities in the Witchtooth Nebula, and then also by orcs in the Kyogen system and Necrons from quarantined worlds in the Pallet system. And even the Eldari and Drakari forces appeared in the nearby Webway spur to join the battle. So if I remember rightly, that's the summary of the map showing you the Bastior subsystem. And actually, yes, there are lots of Xenos stuff here as well. So if you want to get involved with, as part of the campaign, you can do everyone. Everyone can join in.
Everyone's having a party, yeah. It does drive me a bit crazy how modern Games Workshop campaign systems and 40k concepts all basically deal in the idea of everything's happening all at once, it's like everyone gets involved. It's like,
I don't mind some. I mean, I didn't have the Tau in there because that would be unfeasible, really. But I think it does go to show you the scope of the systems that, Drakari raiders are always there.
Yes, of course.
Elders always floating around. Orcs permeate every part of the galaxy in little pockets that are being a nuisance to everyone. And often, the Votan are around as well. So it sort of gives it a bit more of a scope, although it does sort of do away with maybe what historically we viewed it as this is Imperial space and all Xenos have been eradicated and the forces of Xenos that are there are an invading force into a very Imperial dominated area, whereas this kind of implies almost that the Imperium doesn't have quite as much grasp on the systems that you would perhaps historically think they might have.
Well, I think it's, again, a consequence of their ever-expanding world in terms of the amount of, factions and things that are being added specifically across, Xenos races, but even just, the division between, having an Imperium world or a Mechanicum world or a Mechanicus world and, all those other kind of variables in between. Oh, this is the Imperial Knight place. This is the, Votan mining place. This is the Orc War place, this is the Tau bit. It's it just seems like there's stuff going on everywhere all the time, which is cool, I suppose, because it creates, again, a great setting for non-stop warfare. But yeah.
And there's the bit where it's the Necrons are in this quarantined area of space where the Imperium doesn't go because of these old tomb worlds. Those little snippets of storytelling make you go, I want to find out a bit more about that, because that actually sounds quite interesting. And I think Games Workshop's quite good at seeding those little story elements. But it's great, but it's sometimes disappointing because they're really interesting, but they never do anything with them other than they're a little nugget. But maybe they're only interesting because it is a nugget. Whereas if they gave you explored that story, you'd be like, oh, it's not as good as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
So it's a double-edged sword, basically.
I think the thing that was funny with the third tendril, though, when it kind of appears, is the notion that not only did they not see it, that it's the biggest one. It's all right, sure, whatever. And as I understood, it wasn't coming from above or below. It just was going straight for them. It's kind of so I guess they were just looking up and down and then forgot to look straight ahead of them.
Well, I got the impression it did come from above again, but
I thought it was literally coming in straight out from on their plane.
I mean, who knows? I can't quite remember, but I got the impression they all came in from the galactic plane and then they level out and then go in a set direction. Fine. But you could argue if they want to go to Terra, why don't they beeline outside of the galactic plane to Terra and then dive down? And then that would be a real nonsense. But then I guess that's less sort of storytelling if that happened.
Exactly. But I think that was the thing. Yeah, the whole kind of, what was the third one called again?
Grendel.
Grendulous. Seemed interesting. So that, again, as it emerged, caused a bunch of trouble to the Leagues of Votan, right? Like they were basically caught up in it when it appeared, so it like ate a lot of Leagues of Votan stuff.
Yeah, I think it did. I don't think I wrote that down, but yeah, I think I do remember some Leagues of Votan got in there, which I didn't know if that was a little nod to just squats.
Yeah, I thought maybe
Tyranids from yonder, and maybe it was like a little Easter egg without, particularly being that exact reference.
So essentially, just to recap where we're at the minute, right? So it starts out, they notice it's all going wrong. Trajan Valores goes, right, come on now, let's get this sorted out. Him and Lord Solar convince everyone to mobilize these things called Soul Blades. They attack the 2 tendrils that they think are there. Mm-hmm. They're having some success, but ultimately it's still obviously fighting massive hordes of Tyranids while besieged on all sorts of other fronts, so it's not the best. They've got these anchor worlds. Things are going okay, but then, oh God, there's a 3rd tendril. Dear, oh dear, everything's starting to fall apart. Is basically
Correct.
Where we're at this stage.
Yeah.
Good. What's next, my friend?
Yeah, so the Talons dig deep, so none of the Ordo Xenos can fathom why this tendril was so concentrated in one subsector, unlike the others, which were a little bit more spread out. But the reinforcements from the Sanctuary Protocol begin to arrive and help defend the systems. Bloody battles soon break out across all the systems as humans and aliens all fight for bitter survival against the Tyranid onslaught. Oh, and then one notable presence was a Jacaro Starframe, which is a Jacaros like the smart monkeys that the Ordo Xenos sometimes have with them. Not Ordo Xenos, just Inquisitors can have them. They used to be in the game. And then the Starframe is a very peculiar looking ship that they have. So it's great that one of those gets name checked. I can't remember if they ever had a miniature, but I think there's illustrations of them online. That you
well, the monkey geezer definitely has a miniature.
No, yeah, the monkey's got a miniature, but I meant the Starframe itself because it could have been from Battlefleet Gothic, but I don't think it was. But I think there's some illustrations online. I'm not sure if they're fan made or if they're official. I think they're official, but yeah, worth checking out of interest.
It's real to me, damn it. That will do.
Exactly. Then we get to first captain of the Ultramarines, Agaman. He heard the distress call, so he raised his own soul blade, intent to use the knowledge passed down from Chaplain Ortan Cassius, the greatest veteran of the First Tyrannic War and longtime hero of the Death Watch. So Agamon's going to be like, I've got the knowledge on how to deal with the Tyranids passed down to me by the greatest of all of them, so I'm going to go help out. After the 11th attack on the Stranglehold system, it fell to the Tyranids. The last Vox message out described a 4 bone sword wielding Tyranid with strategic intellect.
What could that be, Phil?
Basically, the Swarm Lord.
Oh my God!
Has been gestated into a new form and has appeared on the battlefield and will be a nuisance throughout. The onslaught intensifies, so new Tyranid ship types appear. Mind Slayers possess the ability to cripple crew with paranoia and hallucinations, while the Tyranids disgorge from these vessels were all psychic in nature, which I guess maybe hints to some of the new psychic Tyranid models that we see in the box set. Soon Tyranids have breached naval defences and made planetfall across all the systems. Captain Agaman is on the planet of Obsidiria. He's obtained a node beast cerebral core, which caused Tyranids to attack them in frenzy because they realise its strategic importance, which causes a Screamer killer attacks a Dreadnought, and then it went on to charge a squad. But Agamemnon steps in to fight it. However, just as he's about to fight it, Twin Las Cannon blasts it from the Brutalis Dreadnought, taking out the monster.
You mean the Ballistus Dreadnought?
Sorry, the Ballistus, that's it, not Brutalis. I wrote that down wrong. You are correct. A dropship arrives to extract them and pass on the message to to Agamemnon that Lord Solar Leontis needs all the soul blades to return to Sanctum. Now, I believe that was a little snippet, because that was, again, a double-page story. I believe that was sort of summarising the launch trailer. Not 100% exactly, but it had a bit about the Terminators. You've got the someone carrying the Xenos specimen in terms of the new apothecary miniature. You had the Dreadnought shooting the Carnifex, for example, which was straight out the trailer. So I believe that was a little recap of that mission, I think. Potentially.
The captain standing atop the head of the Screamer Killer as stolen valor. Is that what we have here? He didn't really take it down. He was simply there.
He pretended to.
Yeah,
he pretended to.
That's it. The miniature would give you the impression that he had killed one, but in fact, he was simply there. Was basically right.
It was just a ballista. He was going to take it down.
He was ready. But, that's what it was.
Well, basically, what was it? Like a snipe kill is what the Ballistus Dreadnought did. It's like you took out the thing I was going to kill from under me and scored those points.
That's it. Someone ninja'd it from out from under him, as they would say back in the old days. I hope he had enough TKP to claim his epics. Anyway, yeah. So that was an interesting insight into obviously their particular. Well, again, obviously the way that was obviously depicted, it wasn't so much about the overall kind of abilities of the Soul Blade, right? Because it's not like you started to kind of see those other kind of Imperial elements come into play there, but you ultimately got to kind of hear about and further, exhilarate, get all excited about all the stuff that the Ultramarine Space Marines got up to when they were murdering Tyranids in a cool way in a CG trailer, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So that was cool. So basically, the geezer who learned a bunch of stuff from old Cassius somehow has now basically turned up and gone, just like old Chaplain Cassius, I'm going to be stubborn and burn you all, which probably makes sense why all those flamethrower Marines turned up.
Yeah, there was a section where they did talk about burning of the pyroblasters. They got name checked in it as well. So they basically did reference a lot of the miniatures from the box set in that section. So maybe it wasn't a one-for-one of the launch trailer, but it was definitely all the models from the launch box in this little story. The next section is the Anvil of Sanctum. So knowing full well that the Shadow and the Warp would cut off all communication, Leontis and his staff had pre-recorded messages and sermons sent out to all planets to be played at set times to set orders and to boost morale, because they know that contact will be lost. Ferocious battles occur all through the sector. There's a feudal world of Jovengast, a Xeno cult uprising occurred from the Surf class. So you get a great idea that Gene Stealer cult aren't just miners. That on this planet it's like a feudal class system, and that they are like the underclass, which I think would be a great conversion potential. And again, an interesting nugget of a story that doesn't really get explored further.
It's all too often the case, isn't it? I mean, again, that's obviously the sad reality of the limitations of the miniature range versus the possibilities within the world of Warhammer.
That is also true. And then the next bit is Navy fleets try their best to halt the Tyranid fleet approaching Sanctum, but all fail. Rumours spread that the Tyranids know of the importance of this anchor world and will do their best to see it consumed. There's no less than 3 star forts plus the phalanx throughout the Bastior subsector. And the star forts are like these huge ships, basically, or battle stations, for want of a better word. So there's a lot of big things to defend this system. Then we're on to Sanctum Defiance. So on Sanctum, Lord Solar Leontis was positioned with the White Templars within the White Templars fortress monastery of Holdfast. So that is the key place on the planet itself. The first line of defense was the Dawn Wall, an asteroid belt and the asteroids are garrisoned and kitted out with weapons and guns and penal legions and servitors, basically whatever they could spare. Mostly the worst of the worst. Soon enough, though, the defences falter, the asteroids get destroyed and devoured or just pushed aside by the larger Tyranid vessels, allowing the tendril to just punch through towards Sanctum. The phalanx and squadrons of warships meet the Tyranids head-on. Group Master Jacobi, he's like the key naval commander, lead the defence of the northern hemisphere, while Tor Garadon of the Imperial Fist, he's on the phalanx and he leads the defence of the south. So they're the key people positioned above the planet, sort of defending the orbit of the planet, basically. The main priority was to stop ships from reaching the surface, and then the secondary priority was to basically eliminate the larger ships in the hope that it could disrupt their command and control within the Tyranid fleet. While they managed to take out quite a few of the large ships, eventually billions of Tyranids soon land on the planet. And then we're going to get basically the defense of the planet itself. So Agamon, Trajan Valorous, also, so like Agamon, Trajan Valorous also heard the plea from Leontis, and he swiftly left. He was in the Xenomark system, so he leaves there with his soul blade to head to Sanctum as well. And then we've got the Devouring Swarm. So on the ground of Sanctum, the Tyranids built up en masses in the wilderness area, away from the strongholds, and they built up in that area, and then they attacked the stronghold locations. They didn't just drop down like directly onto the fortified positions. You get Titans fighting Bio-Titans, sister Ordos fight side by side, burning Tyranids, along with all the ancient forests as well, because they're out slightly outside of the fortifications, and they're destroying these ancient forests because they just need to burn everyone, basically.
Like burn it all down, absolutely.
Exactly. As more leader units arrive on the planet, the strategic ability of the swarms improve, and deploying ever more clever tactics, and reports soon emerged that the Swarm Lord was also being sighted and posed a threat to Holdfast. To the west of Holdfast, Tyranids hordes led by the Swarm Lord attack, and to the east, Trigons and Morlocks burst from tunnels alongside with a myriad of other Tyranid bioforms, including a trio of Norn emissaries.
Oh, there we go.
New monster. And we'll see what happens to those later. Then we get Hope Kindled. So with less than a third of the fleet above Sanctum, the remaining asteroid relays pick up fresh Imperial signals. Reinforcements have arrived in the nick of time.
As they do.
Thank goodness, as they always do. Then we're back to Holdfast. So Leontis and the Chapter Master Stravo acted in sync with each other. Leontis raising morale and coordinating the strategic command, while Stravo met the enemy head-on in combat and drive back any breaches. I think this is the point where I was like, this is very much a, the adage of show not tell.
Yeah.
And this is a bit where they're like, Leontis is a strategic mastermind, and then they don't tell us why, or they don't show us why. They just say, he does amazing strategy, guys, believe us. But I wish they actually could come up with like snippets of interesting sermons to show you that he's boosting morale, or actually give us genuine, interesting tactical insight and strategy. But that would involve actually thinking quite hard about it to actually do it. It's just easy to say he's a master strategician, rather than actually having to come up with the thing that he supposedly did, if that makes sense.
No, I totally agree with you. I think the problem is always with this stuff, is it becomes very much like, as you start reading through some of these kind of campaign narratives within these books, you've got to kind of look for the kind of intriguing narrative elements and kind of pull them out and really kind of embellish them, I think, because a lot of it just becomes like a laundry list of
it's very broad strokes sometimes, when they're like rattling through everything, basically.
Well, it's because they've got so much to get in there, right? Like when they told the stories of like Armageddon back in the day, Armageddon essentially incorporated a multitude of different factions, but, you know, they were able to kind of, at least, you know, to a successful degree, embellish certain ideas and certain commanders and show those elements, you know, because we spent time with Yarick holding, you know, the fortifications with his Steel Legion, and we spent time with, you know, the Salamanders and the Black Templars and obviously Gazkol as well, right? Like those elements all become quite well fleshed out in terms of where they represented and what they did. And yeah, okay, fair enough, they do still kind of catalog and go through timelines, but because it's isolated to one world and it's fought between 4 or 5 different commanders, you can kind of start to build a bit more of a cohesive narrative. Whereas with this, because we're fighting on multiple different worlds, introducing multiple different commanders, and then we have to kind of shoehorn in the box content and be like, here's this stuff because that's important. You know, to begin with, we were telling the story of Trajan Valorous and Lord Solar, but now actually we've got to incorporate this in. And then, lo and behold, here are some other soul, God, what is the words for it again? Soul blades. Soul blades. Here's some more soul blades from other chapters that, again, don't necessarily even incorporate the idea of what the Soul Blade was initially, because at the start the Soul Blade was a combination of all the different Imperial forces. That's what they're called. And then they go, here's the Soul Blades from Blood Angels. And you're like, admittedly, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here a bit. But my point is like, here they are. But it's like, are they actually a Soul Blade, or is that just a company or a you know, one Blood Angel ship, you know, with a company on it, you know, like it's just sort of.
Well, like, yeah, I sort of feel like the Soul Blades were very small forces of individual things. So one was Custodes, one was Blood Angels, or they would put down into a handful of ships to be sort of these autonomous groups.
Yeah, so the idea was
it was thing.
It was like a command substructure. So the idea was it was incorporating Space Marines, Guardsmen, Custodes, Sisters. Like it was all that the Navy, all kind of mushed, as opposed to.
No, I got the impression each one was individual. So Sisters would have their own Soul Blades, Space Marines would have their own Soul Blades.
Okay.
And they would operate as like 2 to 3 ships each.
Fine.
So that's what I got the impression from it was, but they list them all out together, which is why I could understand why you think it might be a Soul Blade is some Space Marines, some Sisters, some Guard all combined together. So the Soul Blades were meant to be more elite, so the Guardsmen are just the dudes on the planets defending and not a part of the Soul Blades. The Soul Blades were the slightly more heavy hitters rather than the Imperial Navy per se. Is the general impression I got. But if you think about things like, so Vigilus, for example, that story was set on one planet and told over 2 books because it was Vigilus Defiant, Vigilus Ablaze. If you think about the ultimate siege campaign of Krieg, basically, that was 3 books it was told over, and that was just a siege of one city. So that was incredibly like minutiate and detailed for the Siege of Rax, which you can't really compare to this, where this is, as you said, it's a campaign across entire systems, and then there's like effectively like probably 10 pages covering the story of the planet, and not even that, because it's also interspersed all the space stuff as well.
Yeah, and that's
so you can't ever get into that granular detail with these books, which is a bit of a shame, but it sort of is what it is, I guess.
Also, as well, there's other sort of supporting media for a lot of this stuff as well, right? There's like more people have dived deep into it. There's more collective kind of works, not just obviously from Games Workshop and their subsidiaries, but also fans as well, right? Like lots of people have explored the idea of Armageddon and interjected their own kind of stuff into it. And obviously Games Workshop themselves have done other kind of media supporting that. So you understand that, you know, those kind of events have been given greater levels of gravitas because they've been given more room to breathe. Whereas, you know, stuff is so kind of roughshod and rapid here that it's hard to kind of even really kind of savor it. And because of the kind of more sort of transient nature, I think, of the way that the lore is being kind of disseminated at the moment for 40k, it's hard to kind of really savor it or kind of get into it. And that's sort of one of the things that's interesting, I think, about when you actually deep dive into this stuff and try and understand it more is, yeah, like there's definitely some interesting stuff in this, and I like narrative elements of it, but you're right, like it doesn't create really very many evocative ideas. It's just like, it's just a lot of things being thrown at a wall in terms of things happening.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I would say it doesn't make me go, well, I really want to play out the fourth Tyrannic War.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, potentially, but not really. Maybe if I had a particular guard army that wasn't Krieg, or maybe if I had Ultramarines, maybe I'd be a bit more inclined to do it. But
the stuff
I don't think so.
The stuff on Sanctum is sort of interesting, and you know, the whole thing with like the White Templars and all of that stuff. There's some interesting narrative ideas, but that's the thing, right? Like if you're gonna center a narrative around, because the key story is Sanctum as being the fortified world, right?
That's the key anchor world.
Yeah, the key
being attacked
anchor world
by Grendel's tendril.
Yeah, so that's the thing, right? If Sanctum is your place, and the White Templars are your place, it feels like, yeah, in a way, it's that thing, isn't it? Where I know they can't paint up the contents of the Leviathan box to be White Templars, right? I understand that they're not the poster boys, but it is that thing where it's almost like, it feels to me like narratively that it would have probably made more sense that if this is the direction you're taking it in, maybe you should have aligned a bit more and brought those elements to life a bit better.
Well, yeah, because what's interesting actually is, other than Agaman and his Soul Blade, I don't think there's really any Ultramarines in this story at all.
Oh no, they're totally shoehorned in to make sure that Ultramarines.
But you see, like the artwork for the Tyrannic War is like the Crusade book has Ultramarines on it, and it's like, and obviously you got the box set, and I think it's just that historic. The historic precedence that Tyrannic War means Ultramarines versus Tyranids, that you make that sort of association. So actually this time around, that's not really the case, but it's presented by Games Workshop as if it is. And it's only when you read the story, you're like, oh, it's not at all.
No. And I mean, Gilliman's barely doing anything in this narrative either. He's off doing
he's not
Crusade.
In it at all. He's off doing his, he's off doing Indomitus Crusade.
But when you watch the trailer for the Tyrannic War stuff at the start of 10th edition, he's very prominently featured, and it's like, he's got nothing to do with it. He's literally off killing chaos. It's like, he doesn't care at all about what's going on in this. Well, obviously he does, but it's like, you know, it's literally, it's one of those weird things. Because
I don't think he's mentioned once, really.
No, he isn't, as far as I can recall. But yeah, the White Templar stuff is interesting. If you were exploring it through the idea of White Templars combat up with the Guard, fortifying their fortress monastery, doing all that stuff, like, yeah, there is stuff in there. But the problem is because it's sort of, you're really gripping at like a couple of paragraphs, and like you say, it's stuff like Lord Solar Leo. I'm just going to start calling him Leo. Leonotus, thank you. You know, it's like, yeah, he's dead good tactics, and the chapter master of the White Templars kills some Tyranids in a tunnel or something. Am I getting ahead of myself? You didn't talk about the tunnel.
No. He goes off to fight the breaches in the walls, basically. So basically, it's like Master Blaster from Mad Max 3. Leontus is the brains, and Stravo is the brawn, and that's how they're in sync with each other in terms of the defense. Yeah, that's where we've gotten up to so far.
Yeah, and I do think there is some interesting narrative elements that you can, draw upon in that section of it. But everything kind of leading up to it, these sort of Soul Blades, small elite kind of things, pretty, like if it is as you've asserted, because at first I was thinking, it's actually quite fun kind of combination of things that could enter into the idea that you could put these kind of fiend forces down on the tabletop. That sounded interesting, but if it's just a small force of Space Marines, it's like a little less little less excited, because I kind of like the idea of this kind of combined arms of elites from these different factions coming together and doing hit and run campaigns and things. But it's just
I could sort of see where you come. Weirdly, that is almost more like the Torchbearer fleets, which were the fleets reinforcing the planets like Bar with the Grey Shields, and it was sisters along with the new Primaris chapter reinforcements that were the Grey Shields, or post Grey Shields maybe, because a lot of them had been painted up in their correct colours by that point, I think, going out to be reinforcing the homeworlds of said chapters, which sort of again has that combination of, it's not just like a mono-faction fighting, it's like a combination of several. So yeah, that is a bit more like that, I think.
It'd be nice as well if they could have added like some Eyes of the Emperor type miniatures, like big custodies outside of their armor. Just kind of.
I've always said I like the idea of just a solo custody model that could join a guard army or a sisters army or a space marine army or something. An imperial army of some sort sounds cool. And
thing is, though, for the design language of the custodies to make it evident on the tabletop, they'll just be like, we'll just put the custodies down. But it's like, yeah, but they're different, aren't they? Because they're not wearing all their crazy armor and stuff. Although I assume they probably keep it on their person somewhere, because that armor has all their names in it and all that stuff. So I can't imagine they leave it behind, but maybe they do.
Well, there's plenty of examples when they're doing like the blood games that they have like it's not displacement fields, but they have like either distortion fields or basically ways of looking like other people, like regular humans, rather than just custodies in their armor. So maybe you could make them in theory look like anything in a way.
It did definitely scream of the Judge Dredd movie, though, with the lore around the Eyes of the Emperor. Actually, I forgot to say about that, where they have to go off and, spread justice into the wasteland, like the old... But anyway, who knows?
Okay, I'll carry on. So we're still on Holdfast, Leontus and Stravo defending. Little by little, the fortress falls as areas become overrun by the Tyranids. The three Norn emissaries stalk the battlefield. One of them squeezes up through a decommissioned turbolift shaft to reach the command sanctum, killing many of them, but a chapter serf manages to seal the doors. He activates a plasma charge that blows up the whole tower, obviously killing himself, but also the Norn emissary in the process. The second emissary is known as the Fiend of Hag Rift. He attacks the chapter's Gene Seed Vault. It's defended by 20 ancient dreadnoughts, which are all destroyed in its defense, but they buy enough time for reinforcements to arrive to see off the Tyranid horde, and the badly wounded Norn emissary skulks back into the shadows to lick its wounds. And then lastly, the third emissary lies out in wait and attacks Leontis as he's crossing the plaza in Holdfast. As the monster's about to strike, it was hit by missiles from an incoming gunship that turns out to be full of custodies. It hovers on the ground. The custodies drop out in epic fashion. The Norn emissaries uses its talons and it shears off the cockpit from the gunship, and the gunship hurtles to the ground and explodes. Trajan and his custodian guard intercept the beast before it can properly reach Leontus. It tears into loads of custodies, killing and maiming many of them. All the while, they're tearing chunks out of the monster with their blades and their bolters. It makes one last desperate leap for Leontus, but Trajan intercepts and cleaves his Watcher's axe into the side of its skull, killing the beast forever.
Dead. Until obviously it gets eaten up and reformed.
In theory, yes. Yes. Then we're on to the final part, which is the Xeno War. So Trajan has gathered other soul blades en route to Sanctum. I think this is a little precursor to when he arrives. So he gathers the soul blades en route to Sanctum. Some he orders to reinforce the other beleaguered parts of the subsystem, while the bulk are headed with him to Sanctum. For some systems, it provides much needed relief, while others are just overrun and beyond saving, and it's too late for them. Meanwhile, Tyranids still have the upper hand on Sanctum, and the Swarmlord is still at large. And then we get aboard the Raven Guard ship, the Pinion Blade, Shadow Captain Sardgarion, I've got as his name, and his men lay in wait. They're scattered. They lay in wait. They're scattered throughout their ship, ready to ambush the Tyranids, which have boarded his ship. So he's got to fight them off. They have a brutal combat. And once it's finished, Shipmaster of Rain summons Garon to the bridge. The Pinion Blade was currently fighting a guerrilla war in the Stranglehold system. So that's where they are. On the bridge's vid feed, Garon can see a moon-sized bioship, but he knows no moon exists in this sector, and the Tyranid origin of the vessel is undeniable. It's clearly a big Tyranid-sized moon thing. The bioship is clearly heading towards the Formidae system, and then Garon issues an order to jump to warp, and it's like, the end.
The end, yeah.
So the battle on Sanctum is unfinished and unresolved. It's sort of at this precarious moment, and there's this big potential boogeyman threat of this jumbo-sized Tyranid ship of some kind, and it sort of ends on a cliffhanger, basically.
Which isn't, to their defence, isn't much different from how they've done it in other editions and other times. So, in other instances, obviously we had the conclusion of the Tyrannic War at the end of, at the end of 7th edition it was then, but so we got the conclusion of the third Tyrannic War at the end of 7th edition with the results of the devastation of Baal, and that was obviously done over many years because that kind of was introduced as a concept relatively early on, so we can't necessarily be too annoyed with them that they're just leaving us on a cliffhanger. I don't overly love the moon thing, though. That's one of those things where I'm like, because to be honest with you, Tyranids moving in these kind of tendrils is a kind of uniquely interesting and kind of terrifying aspect of them, right? Like the idea that they are this mass of biomass that is swarming through the world is exciting and interesting. In all seriousness, a moon-sized Tyranid thing is actually way less terrifying or impressive than one of the tendrils, theoretically, in terms of what the
I guess it's meant to be terrifying in its size, but the thing that is normally terrifying about Tyranids is the sheer numbers. It's billions and billions of ships. That's like this unstoppable force. It's meant to be it's meant to be overwhelming in its unimaginable size. It's like H.P. Lovecraft's size. Like, it's inconceivable how big they are. So to do it just going, it's a big Death Star. And the fact that they refer to it as a moon just felt like that scene in A New Hope where they're like, that's no moon. Yeah. And it's like, okay, we get the reference, guys. It feels, that sort of cliffhanger feels a bit similar to the Arcs of Omen cliffhanger, which we just had, which was, the ship planet that basically Vastor and Abaddon have is effectively like the Rock, isn't it? It's like a recreation of a diabolic recreation of the planet from which the Dark Angels were from. And that sort of zips off into the weird warp tunnel that it can create and disappears off into, futures unknown as it's finding the last key piece to unlock the super weapon or something. Yeah. So it feels similar that it's like another big thing. It's like we've just had a big thing. Yeah. This is another big thing. Yeah. I don't mind it being a cliffhanger because I think the thing that annoyed me most about the fall of Cadia it was like this really interesting premise of, oh my god, the Cicatrix Maledictum's open, we've got the 13th Crusade happening, Abaddon's finally attacking Cadia, and then in that same book Cadia just gets destroyed, and it's like, oh, it's like I would have liked time to breathe with that story and play it out and play the defense of Cadia with all the forces being there, sort of in the way that we had with Vigilus. And so I don't mind it being open-ended for a time, but I feel like, cool, at the end of the edition, it would be great to finish this story off.
Yeah.
Rather than go, yeah, cool, we're doing 500 worlds now, and it's another thing, and this just gets left open-ended for another edition or 2 editions where they will just dip in and out of it. It's like, because I think the next Crusade book after this one is the Nachman Gauntlet, which is another
No,
story.
it was that Pariah Nexus. It was Pariah Nexus, then Nachman Gauntlet, then Armageddon.
So I'm sure I bought. I was going to say I thought Pariah Nexus was in there, but maybe. Oh, I've been reading the next story wrong. I've skipped ahead one. I hope I've got the book. I'm pretty sure I did.
Mate. I don't think anyone bought it. It was not that. Yeah. So hang on. 40K.
Because I definitely got the Nachman Gauntlet, and I've got Armageddon. Maybe I've misplaced my copy, but. Yeah, again, so my point is the Nachman Gauntlet one is a carrying on the story of Vigilus, which was an 8th edition story. The Pariah Nexus is carrying on the 9th edition story, and now we've got another 10th edition story, and all these stories are happening effectively simultaneously. And I guess maybe that's good because some of them focus on particular different factions. So it's like, cool, I'm Tyranids, I'm going to focus on the Tyrannic War. I'm Chaos, I guess I'm going to focus on the Nachman Gauntlet. I'm Necrons, I'm going to focus on Pariah Nexus. And I guess if you're Orcs, you'll probably be doing Armageddon at some point, right? We would assume. So maybe that's why they're all kept open, is so each faction can have a big story that they can focus around. But as someone that's dabbling in all the stories, it would be nice to put a bow around some of them and finish them off. And then, because I don't mind like this edition just being all themed to the Tyrannic War. And then they go, cool, that's that story done. Next edition is another story. And then you sort of play that story throughout the entire edition if you want to. But I don't like it when they go, yeah, cool, here's this thing and the story's pretty much finished as it's told. I mean, in a way they did that with Siege of Vrax, although that was over 3 books and obviously over several years. But the story was told and completed. It wasn't left open-ended. But it's like, but here's the campaign so you can recreate it. So that it does work in that sense. And the other one that had Krieg was Fall of Orpheus, which was left deliberately open-ended. That was Necrons invading Imperial World and Minotaurs and Krieg fighting it out. And they tell the story up until effectively this same point in this story, where the final crux of it is left open-ended for you to like finish off and play out. And the campaign is playing that last bit of the story. So they can, each one has like merits, right? If they're just sort of telling a story and leaving it open versus telling a story that finishes.
Yeah. And it's probably also worth highlighting that to the best of our understanding, or as it is said to be, the events of Space Marine 2 occurred during this 4th Tyrannic War, and it's evident that obviously this is occurring within that kind of space because obviously they are fighting against the forces of High Fleet Leviathan in the events of Space Marine 2. And then, as we understand it, the 500 Worlds piece is going to come years later, obviously, once Titus is, returned to captainhood. And that is essentially another kind of story beat that effectively is happening far into the future. So essentially, if Titus and the events of Space Marine 2 are happening kind of alongside the events of the 4th Tyrannic War, which is concluded in this kind of cliffhanger moment, our assertion is that 500 Worlds will start to offer some kind of, insight on what is happening next within this kind of Tyrannic War story, although probably not, because it's happening obviously within the system of Ultramar, which is not, to the best of my knowledge, in the west of the Warhammer 40,000 universe. I believe Ultramar is more towards the east. So, yeah, I don't know in terms of whether they're going to revisit that or whether they're going to deal with like the Necron stuff or what they're going to do with 500 Worlds. Obviously, we know that there's a heavy emphasis on Necrons now because we've seen the new kind of boarding action style terrain featuring the kind of Necron Tomb Worlds. We know that the Nightbringer is coming with a new miniature. So who knows what they're doing with 500 Worlds in terms of the events of the Fourth Tyrannic War. But it is uniquely interesting that the setting and world of Space Marine 2 is so kind of obviously linked to the events of the Tyrannic War. And then obviously 500 Worlds, you would assert, would, you know, maybe continue or clarify aspects of that story, but seemingly isn't, although we don't know, do we? This is the fun thing to speculate, I guess.
Yeah, it's true. I was just trying to look up the plot of Space Marine 2. So it says when they Titus is leading the Death Watch, that's in the Residious system. So it seems like the area where Space Marine 2 is happening isn't at all tied into the Tyrannic War campaign book. It's not even like teased or mentioned in any way. And you would have thought they would have maybe like name dropped it as like an Easter egg or tried to tie it in a little bit closer.
Well, it's because Space Marine 2 came out after 10th edition came out, and like, you know, who knows?
I know, but you would have thought they'd be developing the story sort of at the same time, because they're both set in the Tyrannic War, so it's not like they're not aware of what each other is doing. So yeah, that's a little odd, but that's it. I guess they've done that deliberately, so it's like its own thing. And that's where you get the weird confusion where, again, Space Marine 2, the Leviathan launch box set is all Ultramarine themed, and yet the actual story doesn't really, other than Agamon, which is a small Soul Blade force, doesn't actually feature any Ultramarines. So there's a weird disconnect between what Games Workshop is telling us the Tyrannic War is versus what the actual story is telling us, which is just an odd disconnect. So they could have linked those all a little bit more together, even if it was just literally a dot on a map going, this planet is here and being reinforced by some Ultramarines, which we know would be Titus, but doesn't actually have to get mentioned per se. But if the planet names lined up, you'd be like, okay, cool, and that's here it's on the map in the book, but it isn't. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see what they do going forwards to finish it up. But I mean, even in 9th edition, they did all the Warzone books, and most of those are still left open-ended, unresolved stories that they can go back to, and some of them were really interesting. Tyranids as well, but don't really tie into this Tyrannic War.
Well, it's different high fleets, wasn't it? I feel like Saga of I can't remember which of the Saga books it was for the or the Warzone books, but I think it was more high fleet Behemoth and those kind of elements.
Quite possibly, yeah, quite possibly.
But yeah, to recap and to round out. So basically, long story short, this is what the Fourth Tyrannic War had to offer. A bunch of stuff started going wrong. All the things started dying in the West. A bunch of old custodies became aware of it and told Teacher. And then Trajan Valoris and old Leo went, right, I've had enough of this, and created a bunch of Soul Blades and a few little anchor worlds and went to war dealing with that stuff. And then, oh no, a third tendril turned up. And then that essentially resulted with them having a bunch of bad things happening, including the forces of the Ultramarines as seen in the box set fighting against some Tyranids, which again could be an interesting narrative setting. But ultimately, the crux of the story revolves around this kind of siege of Sanctum, the home world of the White Templars, fortified by the forces of Leo, and then later supported by the custodies of Trajan as he comes to their rescue. And then effectively, after all of that has occurred, it is asserted that between all of these other Soul Blades turning up and Leo and everybody doing a good job, they have, somewhat blunted the attack. They've sort of calmed it down a little bit, but they're out in space, and lo and behold, there's a moon-shaped Tyranid thing, and that is bad news for any kind of future happenings. But we're waiting to discover what that actually means. But
yeah. And they're heading, and that's heading off to a different system entirely from where it's currently being
might be
set.
heading
So we don't
towards
know
the 500
importance of
worlds.
that.
Hey, there you go. Could be going towards Ultramar.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. What was it? Like it wasn't formaldehyde, but it was something like that. It was the
Formaldehyde
system. No, Formadeer system.
Yes.
So, is that anything? If we were to look that up, maybe. So one credit is that often I complain that the books are written in this really overly wordy, verbose, almost poetic language that I really personally struggle to read. And you're constantly looking up the dictionary to work out what the words are. And it's very self-indulgent in that respect. And this was actually much more sort of plain and straightforward in terms of how it was written. And I found it a lot more easier just to read and get through than a lot of the Warzone books. So props to Games Workshop for doing that. However, the story itself ultimately wasn't that interesting, I don't think. The Soul Blade sounded really interesting, and they get sort of snippets of detail, and then it, as you said earlier, I think it's trying to cover too much in this sort of broad section that you just get these snippets of overviews without really drilling into any detail or real story. It's just Tyranids invade, humans defend, everyone wins a bit, everyone loses a bit, cliffhanger, and that's it. Whereas it could have been a bit more interesting.
Well, it's a real opportunity for them to further flesh out the character of Lord Solar Leo, because, you know, he is a character that they introduced in 9th edition, who basically was kind of broadly synopsisized as being the wealthiest person, thus became in charge of the guard. But he's obviously a tactician and a warrior of some, you know, status and some, you know, power. And that is obviously spoken to here, but it isn't really demonstrated. And I think that's where the problem lies. It's like, if you wanted to really kind of take it as an opportunity to further embellish the accolades and the abilities of the new Lord Solar, I think this was a good opportunity to, you know, really kind of, you know, let that marinate and let that kind of come to the fore. But they didn't really do it. They just sort of blasted through everything and gave you very kind of straightforward clip notes to suggest that he's good at this, trust us, as you identified.
Yeah.
And I think the stuff with Trajan was fine, but it was kind of like, again, I guess the thing is when you create a series of stakes that involve such a powerful enemy, you need an equally powerful deterrent or an equally powerful, you know, kind of force to match it. And I feel like that's why the Custodians were kind of shoehorned into this narrative, because ultimately, how are we going to get out of this situation? Trajan Valores, one of the greatest Custodians, comes and it's all good. You know, it's like, well, yeah, okay, fair enough.
Yeah, like, because Leontas isn't a warrior that he could just take on a Norn emissary, but it could have been gunned down by guardsmen or artillery or something. Like, they didn't necessarily need to interject that, but I can sort of see why they would, and they also probably want to include Custodes, so Custodes can play the campaign and things like that. And just one quick note, I googled what the Formadeer system is. It's the system where Sanctum actually is. So that system is clearly part of the Bastial subsector, but in the majority of the storytelling, they always refer to it as the Bastial subsector. So I completely myself missed the Formadeer system is the main one where all the battles taking place. So if they had said it's just going towards Sanctum, that would have made much more of an obvious cliffhanger as to what was going on. But because they almost obfuscated what was going on by using the Formadeer system, which I don't think they necessarily name check as often as the others, or maybe that was just me completely missing it. But
well, they mentioned it a bunch when they're establishing the anchor worlds and stuff. So they talk about the Formadeer system and that stuff quite a bit. By the way, as well, the Phalanx stuff was kind of really brushed over as well. The Phalanx, sorry.
Yeah, like you don't hear really what happens to it. Does it get damaged? Because it was always like this big thing, like when the actual Cicatrix Maledictum happens, it arrives on Terra to defend Terra from like their incursions that they're having, and it was basically like, yeah, we're having so much trouble, it's just going to have to stay here to defend Terra. So the fact it leaves Terra is like a really big thing, but then it doesn't, as you say, really do much. Obviously, it's like, yeah, it's got some drop ships, and I think a bunch of the Imperial Fists like land on Sanctum to defend as well, I think.
Well, it basically delays them, right? Because the idea is that the Tyranid fleets smash through. Was it called Dawn's Wall? I can't remember.
Yeah,
now.
So Dawn's Wall is the astoid belt.
That's right. Yes,
which had all the defenses in. The Tyranids sort of destroy that and sort of smash through it, and then they're greeted by the Phalanx and the Imperial Navy above the planet. Yeah,
and that sort of delays them a bit, as I understand it. But ultimately, they still get there. And then
so it's a battle on two fronts. There's a battle above orbit, and it's a battle down on the actual planet itself, which was actually the way it read really reminded me of the Angron book, because the Angron book is chaos invading. I can't remember the name of the planet, but Angron's trying to get to the planet to get to basically the big beacon. That's it's like the faith beacon of some kind, and that's the thing. He creates the murder lust by basically smashing into it and sort of destroying himself at the same time. But that whole story of that planet being attacked, and there's a big space battle and there's a big ground battle, just felt very similar to that story, I thought.
Yeah, and again, the introduction of these Mind Slayer ships and what they have with all the kind of psychic stuff coming out of it. Again, kind of shoehorning in the fact that they're going to have miniatures that are going to have a bit more of a sort of, psychic terror element to it, which was, interesting in and of itself.
Again, interesting, but it's literally a paragraph. They mention and then they never talk about again, and you never see the consequences of anything ever really happening, because it again is just too broad strokes, and I guess they're trying to give you the grand scale of it all, so they sort of have to be. But I feel like they could have potentially crunched down a lot of the periphery stuff and just focused on Sanctum from the start, maybe, and then you could have had a bit more of a focused storyline. But then maybe they feel like they've done that before with, Vigilus and stuff, and they do want a bit more of a grand narrative that they want to tell.
Yeah, it just becomes that thing, I suppose, where you realise that, the game and the world and the setting now it's all kind of set across all these different warring areas, and people can be anywhere they need to be when they need to be. But ultimately, the idea is like you said, Phil, there's a couple of different kind of conflicts happening seemingly simultaneously now that involve different kind of key players. I think based on that, I think they could probably do themselves a favor and really drill down more into who those key elements are, because I kind of like the narrative of this being Lord Solar and the White Templars fighting Tyranids. But the problem is White Templars are not a marquee part of the Warhammer brand, so it's sort of like You've put White Templars at the kind of forefront of this, but they're not really a big deal within your IP. So ultimately, it's sort of odd that you didn't just go, it can't be Imperial Fist because they're on Terror. It can't be this. It can't be that, I guess. So, but and then it becomes that weird thing where the product meets the world, and ultimately the priorities of the businesses is here are Ultramarines because you like Ultramarines, buy Ultramarines, and then it's like, but here's the story. We're shoehorning Ultramarines into it, but it's not really about them. It's sort of, it's just a bit discombobulated. It's almost like...
well, they do sort of justify it by sort of saying there's not really any White Templars there anyway because they're all off on Crusade. But weirdly, the chapter master just happens to be there with a couple of guys.
Well, I guess he's just got to look after the planet, innit? He's just the caretaker now. It's like Gilliman turned up and took all his mates off, and he's just like, I guess I'll just stay behind then, I guess. What a treat.
Yeah, but he's not on the campaign. But oh well.
Yeah, well, it's fine. It's fine. He gets to be in charge of the world and then left behind to look after it. It's sort of like
I mean, I don't mind that it's White Templars and it's not a big name brand chapter, because that's I don't mind that either. Quite cool and brave. But as you say, it then makes it more interesting if that's going to be the focus of the next book, because as you say, no one really plays them. and they're not a big staple.
And this is the thing, though. I feel like when years and years ago in 3rd edition, where they decided to put Black Templars as the Space Marine chapter facing off against the Drakari, or Dark Elder as they were at the time, you know, no one really had any meaningful understanding of what Black Templars were back when they introduced 3rd edition. It was just a new colour scheme for Space Marines, and ultimately people fell in love with it after that because Black Templars became kind of more revered and more important because of their inclusion in that 3rd edition box and that beautiful John Blanche artwork, etc., etc. And then, you know, from there, we then kind of fell into a pattern of a couple of releases being Ultramarine specific. We had, you know, the McCrag one, and then we had the Black Reach one, which was both Ultramarines. And then they decided to sort of change tack with Dark Vengeance and give us, you know, Dark Angels versus a new Chaos Space Marine traitor in the form of the Crimson Slaughter. But then from everything since then, there's basically been, across the fullness of starter box sets, 2nd edition was Blood Angels, 3rd edition was Black Templars, 4th, 5th, Ultramarines, 6th, 7th, Dark Angels, and then everything from there on is Ultramarines. The rumours are that the 11th edition box set won't be Ultramarines, as a nice change of tact. But it seems like Ultramarines are getting releases after releases now. I mean, obviously you've seen the latest series of teasers where they're like, what's that? More Ultramarines? It's like, oh God, like, will it ever end? Although, fun story, Phil, confirmed, Numania's Calgar miniature is on the diorama at Warhammer World.
Oh yeah, the really big battle one.
Yes, yeah. So it's weird because of like timey-wimey stuff. I've said this already, but like I look at that big diorama at Warhammer World and think to myself, it can't be that old. Can't have been there that long. I feel like maybe it's been there like 10, 11 years at this point, maybe.
At least,
but like,
yeah, because it's been up there since we've been going to Warhammer World.
Yeah, but there was a time, Phil, when we would go there and it wasn't there, remember? Like we definitely... You and I have been going in the times before.
I feel like when I started going there, you're right, there wasn't an exhibition centre at all. Yeah. And then, yes, it appeared and it's been there ever since. Yeah. So, yeah, the fact that there'd been 3 Marnius Calgar upgrades or miniatures on that diorama is quite impressive.
I do like the fact that they do change it, though. It's sort of a funny thing that they do it, but also, again, just have the forethought of it. It sort of speaks to Games Workshop and the studio teams and everyone else's kind of attention to detail. I remember when we were there the first time, and the first time we saw that they changed the Calgar model, and at the time people weren't the biggest fans of that Calgar model because basically everyone wanted Calgar to be a Dreadnought. That was kind of what was being the thing that it sounded like it was going to be. And then when it was just some Gravis Calgar mini, people were like, oh. And at the time, moods were kind of mixed towards Primaris. People accepted the miniatures were cool, but conceptually it kind of fell a bit short of people's expectations at the time. So I remember being in there and someone being like, oh no, they've changed Calgar, and the room like, boo, lame. But now, you know, obviously now he's been converted up to his Pat Butcher form and everyone's dead in favour because he's back in Terminator armour, even though he's got big Pat Butcher earrings and, you know, the same haircut, etc. You know, is what it is. You know. Pat Butcher was a real one, you know. She was a warrior queen, so why wouldn't you theme Calgar after her?
Fair.
But anyway, in summary, yeah, the 4th Tyrannic War, interesting way to kick off the edition. Definitely feels like one of those instances where a decision driven by necessity rather than kind of creative imperative. It feels like a very kind of rushed and very sporadic piece of narrative, but, you know, it's interesting in itself. It's got some interesting ideas in it. I wish they'd spend a little bit more time giving it an opportunity to kind of marinate, as they say, and I also wish that across the span of this edition they'd actually done more to kind of give greater clarity and ultimately address some of the narrative ideas that have happened. But now, as we're approaching the end of 10th edition, it seems unlikely that will be the case. But maybe, just maybe, Phil, when we get to talking about 500 Worlds, we'll be, you know, pleasantly surprised that there's a bunch of really cool stuff that starts to wrap this up or add more layers of intrigue.
Or maybe not. Maybe it'll be one of those things where each edition they will do a book that will expand a story and this is obviously the first one for the Tyrannic War. We're on the, I guess, second one for Vigilus and Banachman Gauntlet, and we're sort of, I guess, on the second one for Prior Nexus. And, give it a few more years where there's a few more books out, maybe it'll be a really interesting, compelling story for each one that's constantly evolving. Because obviously it felt like Armageddon was this place that you would keep revisiting every few years, and it was like this iconic location. And these will become similarly iconic locations, but just in the fullness of time, and we're not there yet. So it sort of feels like maybe we're potentially being overly critical, because what it feels like we've got so far isn't that great, but in due course it will be really interesting, and the story will evolve, and we'll be every edition get to tell the next bit of that story. But I mean, maybe that's not what people want though.
Yeah, my main critique of it is it just needed some cooler moments where they actually really kind of embellish some of those aspects. Like I would have liked to have had them spend more time with Leo, and seeing more of the examples of his skill set.
Show not tell. Like they talk about the Swarm Lord, but it's like you don't see him do anything. He's just literally this figure in the background that's being a strategic genius like Leontus, but you're not seeing that strategic, genius in action whatsoever. It's it's a bit of a shame. It reminds me of I think it was the Thrawn trilogy books in Star Wars, which were like the three main books that came out after the original trilogy. And like the tactical genius of Grand Admiral Thrawn, the one story that I remember is they basically talk about they tilt the Star Destroyer to its side, so the TIE fighters coming out of the Star Destroyer aren't getting shot at straight away. They go around like behind the ship and can like converge on the enemy. And maybe if you were to think about it, you'd be like, well, maybe that's a load of nonsense. But at the time when I was reading it as a kid, I remember going, oh, wow, like that's really a cool concept that, you're not just fighting on the same plane, because all the ships are always lined up and they're not like in all different directions, but he sort of tilts it and it goes, oh wow, like you're fighting in 3D space, and you have an advantage this way. And just that narrative sort of element of even just makes you go, oh, he is a strategic genius, because that's like a really cool concept. It's like I needed that from Leontus. I needed to see him do something cool, issue some great orders, perform a marvelous counterattack or an ambush on the Tyranids or something, and not just being told he's doing this. That's all I need from that story, really.
Yeah, and again, trying to create that in a way that isn't super contrived as well, right? So like the idea of him like outsmarting one of these things or whatever, it starts to feel like one of those sort of movies or sequences where it's like, aha, I have done this, and and that's the thing. I think those elements could have been there, because again, it's the idea around, okay, we've got these anchor worlds, and this is how it works, and these are the orders of defense, and the thing is, I suppose within the world of Warhammer 40,000, there's only so many ways that you can communicate the idea of because ultimately a character like Leonard, I cannot figure out his name. Leo. A character like that isn't peerless, right? Like his strategic capabilities will not supersede characters like Rogel Dawn, will not supersede characters like Gilliman, or even other kind of faction kind of equivalents. And I think that's always the problem with it now, is like when you set these benchmarks so high, I guess that's the thing. Like the thing that was so compelling about the situation that Yarrick found himself in was more just his stick-to-itiveness, but also just his stubbornness, his anger and his fury, and the idea that he's just like, I'm not going to die here until you're all dead, because he's just literally so annoyed and just utterly stubborn in the face of impossible odds. And that's a really beautiful set of attributes that are actually weirdly quite uniquely human and quite cool for that character, because you can't see a character like Dawn being like that, because Dawn is a rational, like strategic defender. He builds constructs that are designed to last, and he has a plan beyond a plan beyond a plan. You know, he's got every contingency thought through. Yarrick was exciting in that situation because he's just really, really, really like convinced that he needs to hold this territory, and he's just going to do it no matter the cost. And that's a sort of like that valiant last stand, and that kind of defiance in the face of certain doom is a really, you know, powerful kind of human attribute that I'd love to see them kind of explore with a character like Solar. But I think the problem is with Solar is he's almost too grandiose. He's almost too hierarchical, too important to even have that kind of character trait. So at this point, they kind of have to be like, oh yeah, he's kind of like you know, a Rogue Dawn, but not nearly as good kind of guy, you know? Yeah,
he's sort of just flouncing around on his posh horse, right? Whereas Yarrick's got a massive claw and can, like, get stuck into a fight. That's sort of the difference. It's, always like, oh, Leontis is with his command group, sort of hiding out back, doing strategy. And it's a bit boring.
But even, like, if you look at, like, what was the name of the commander of the Cadians before new Lady Cadian?
Creed.
Yes, Creed, yes. Castellan Creed.
Castellan Creed.
Yeah. So, like, Castellan Creed was a really interesting character as well, though, because he had the martial might of the Cadians, and he was very, very kind of, you know, particular in their deployment, but very kind of pound it to dust kind of situation, right? Like he was this really kind of stoic, very kind of abrupt, powerful leader as well, though. But again, he wasn't kind of defiant in the face of it because he had all the martial might and all the kind of all that sort of element that was Cadia. Cadia was like, you know, like a very different type of, you know, imperial army. And I think that was the thing where, like, he as a character is interesting because I didn't necessarily always, I mean, he was obviously strategically sound, but it was more just a case of, you know, we're gonna pound you into dust, as I say, was kind of his logic, I suppose, by comparison. And again, I can't speak to any of the, Death Corps of Krieg kind of characters, but again, maybe, you know, I get the feeling with people like Venner is there's more of a kind of relationship between the, you know, the value of human life and the nature of, like, the thing that they do. It feels like there's a bit more of a kind of cold kind of indifference with characters like that, maybe. But maybe that's just me reading the room wrong on that side of things. But yeah, I don't know. When you've got these human commander characters in the world of Warhammer, you can do really interesting things with them and have more of those human narratives. In a way, it's actually, I think, to his detriment that they just describe him as a strategic genius and, you know, a peerless character, because that's kind of an attribute that you want for your Astartes and your Primarchs and your Custodes, right? You want the human characters to be a bit more human, I guess.
Well, flawed,
and that's maybe the thing that I'm still not getting
a bit more human.
Yeah. Anyway, there we go. The fourth Tyrannic War, everybody. What a jaunt. We will at some point move on to talking about, I guess, Pariah Nexus is the next one, so we'll get around to.
If you said that's the next one, I'll dig out the book.
It definitely is, yeah. So it went Tyrannic War, Pariah Nexus, Nakman Gauntlet, and then Armageddon. Those are like the 4 Crusade books of this edition. So we'll get around to it. Who knows? Maybe obviously next time around we'll end up with a Grotmas thing. But yeah, there we go. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Let us know how you thought we got on with it. You know, if we are going to be doing Pariah Nexus next time, we'll probably end up putting out the episode in 2 weeks because it takes us a bit more time to actually read and understand this stuff. It actually requires some work for a change, which is very unlike us, isn't it, Phil?
Yeah. I sort of I've worked out I can probably read it in about a week. Yeah. But you've got to read quite a lot of pages per day to make it done. Which is, it's sort of doable, but it's not an easy feat, especially since for the last few nights I've been reading the wrong book. So I had to find my Pariah Nexus book and not Nakman Gauntlet.
Well, we'll do Nakman Gauntlet, yeah. You know, it seems like there's no real correlation.
We're doing it in order. We're doing it in order.
We're doing the order that they were released, not necessarily the order that they happened. But
correct.
Yeah. But the hope is that, you know, by the time we've done these, when 500 Worlds comes around in early next year, we'll be well positioned to start moving into the narrative events that close out the edition. That was the thought process anyway behind it.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Good. Well, cheers, everyone. We hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.